Ard was a powerful but miserable demon lord who unsubscribes from life because he was lonely. However, everything changes when he's reborn with overpowered abilities, but he pretends to be a nobody, so he can rizz up the town baddies and finally hold some melons. 3,000 years ago, when Ard was still demon lord Varvatos, he would aura farm in public while secretly dying of loneliness. He was so overpowered and revered that he couldn't build a normal relationship with people, and his non-existent social skill wasn't helping either. All his friends had left him to get cracked one by one, and after he bid farewell to his last friend, Lydia, whose corpse lay in his castle, he decided to end his current life and be reincarnated as a side character so he could have a normal life. Years passed, and he succeeded in being reborn as the only son of a random couple. Since he had retained all his memories, remastering magic and rebuilding his martial arts skills were a piece of cake. The only problem was that he still hadn't made any friends, which was the one thing he longed for in his previous life. One particular day, the chance arrived when he noticed some boys playing outside, but because he was socially awkward, he just stared at them, which freaked them out so much that they left in haste. Refusing to give up, he went into town and tried to engage with some girls, only to double over from anxiety. When he overcame it, he called out to the girls and, like an authoritative idiot, promised to give them half the world if they became his friends. The girls responded by running away because his behavior was giving them the creeps, and they wanted nothing to do with it. Dejected, he went into the forest and vented his anger on anything and everything he saw. Later that same day, while he was sulking outside his home, the town's mayor, who was an elf named Weiss, approached him. After listening to Ard's recap of his friend-making quest, he told him that staring people down and offering them worldwide real estate wasn't exactly the path to friendship. He advised him to try being kind and respectful, and attempted to recommend his daughter for the position, but Ard was too excited to test his advice, so he didn't hear him and rushed off. Unfortunately, Ard spent the whole day fooling himself around town, and by evening, he was back to square one. As he sat in the forest, sulking and roasting all the monsters who approached him, he heard a girl's voice and flew to investigate. To his surprise, the girl, Irina, was battling a low-level monster known as the Ancient Wolf, and he assumed she was taking out her frustration on it. When she eventually finished off the wolf with a lightning spell, Ard noticed that she looked a lot like Lydia, and he tried to approach her. Irina instantly became alert, but he assured her that he meant no harm and only wanted to be friends. Irina just watched him skeptically, but when he tried to talk no jutsu her into accepting his proposal by saying they were similar, Irina became angry. She told him never to assume things he knew nothing about and ran off crying, leaving Ard to question whether he was a human repellent. Ard followed her, only to find her crying in Weiss's arms. When he realized that she was Weiss's daughter, he convinced himself that they were destined to be friends. So from that day forward, Ard became a thorn in Irina's side, following her everywhere she went. Irina rejected him at every turn, but Ard was more determined than a desperate simp and refused to back down. One night, while cooking up a plan to win Irina over, he heard screams, and when he went to investigate, he discovered the town was under attack by goblins. He immediately moved to flex his abilities, but his father ran past him and cut down the goblins. He then told Ard that the dungeon's core was acting up and spamming monsters like a newbie gamer spams moves. Just then, Weiss ran up to them and said Irina hadn't returned from the mountains. Ard figured she was hiding from him, so he told Weiss he'd find her and flew off before either man could stop him. Meanwhile, Irina was surrounded by a group of goblins who were about to feast on her. At this, she cried out to the universe for help, which fortunately arrived in the form of Thor's wrath, or rather, Ard's lightning. When Irina saw him, she told him to run away, but Ard said he'd come to be her knight in shining armor. He then unleashed another bolt of lightning, which took out half of the goblin squad. As for the rest, he offered to let them walk free, but the pea-brained idiots tried to attack him, so he made them combust. Their leader was the only one left, so he tried to yeet, but Ard finished him off before he could even get far. With the goblins dead, Irina told Ard that he shouldn't have saved her because she'd been looking forward to going to Valhalla. Ard told her not to say such things, but she complained that he didn't understand what it felt like to be isolated and unwanted. Ard assured her that he could absolutely relate because he was in the same position. However, if they became friends, their days of being outcasts would be over. Irina thought he was only saying what she wanted to hear, but Ard swore by the demon lord Varvatos that he was telling the truth, and that made her change her mind. Years later, the two had grown up, and one morning, Ard woke to find Irina in his bed. When he began complaining about personal space, she cut him off and asked if he'd enroll in the Magic Academy with her. Unable to refuse her, Ard accompanied Irina to see the Academy's headmaster, an old geezer named Gold, who wouldn't stop glazing them. When he mentioned that it was an honor to be in the presence of the offspring of the realm's heroes, Ard wondered what the old man was smoking. Gold revealed that he'd heard about their legendary showdown with the goblin years ago, so they would be exempt from taking the practical enrollment exams. Ard assured him that they would ace the written part, and the semi-bald gnome said he would expect nothing less. Days later, the exam results were posted, and while Irina scored high, Ard saw a 0 next to his name and was instantly hit with a mix of shame and confusion. As his thoughts began spiraling, Gold tapped his shoulder and congratulated congratulated him for passing with flying colors. Confused, Ard asked if he should book the old man for an eye checkup or send him to get his head checked. Gold explained that Ard's answers hadn't matched the standard of modern ideology because they far surpassed what top-class mages could give, which was proof of his genius. He then announced to the students that they were all fortunate to be studying alongside the son of the heroes who defeated the resurrected evil god 10 years ago. This great reveal hit Ard like a truck, and as they walked to class, Irina confirmed it was true. Ard suddenly got a headache because he always thought his parents were regular nobodies, but now he wondered whether the plot gods really understood the meaning of ordinary. When they finally got to class, their classmates flocked around them, trying to befriend them because of their status. Ard felt a tad bit uncomfortable, but he said nothing and just smiled like a professional celebrity until a commotion caught his attention. A pink-haired succubus named Ginny was being harassed by an elf named Elraldo, who accused her of gaining admission using her womanly charms. Irina stepped in first and called him out for his lack of manners, but Elraldo replied that he had every right to discipline Ginny because her family served his. Ard told him that his reason was just as stupid as he was and demanded an apology from him. The boy smugly said that he'd consider it if Ard beat him in a duel, but he didn't think he could, since he was on the road to earning the title of Square Mage, the fourth highest rank in the country. As he and his friends started laughing, the teacher walked in, demanding to be let in on the joke. Her voice sounded oddly familiar, and when Ard saw her, he was shocked to see that it was Olivia, one of his trusted generals when he was still the Demon Lord. Olivia had always been sharp-witted, so he was worried that she'd recognize him. If that happened, she'd scold him for not reclaiming his position after being reborn. Fortunately, she was more interested in the duel and approved it on the spot. Once outside, Ard made a mental note to hold back so Olivia wouldn't catch on. However, when Elraldo attacked with a fire spell, he easily defended himself by activating a mega wall without any projections. Impressed, Elraldo complimented Ard, but the guy's indifference pissed him off, so he attacked him with another supposedly powerful spell, only for it to also fail. When he started complaining, Ard realized that Elraldo had taken the fake it till you make it quote very seriously, so he called him out, saying he was no different from a party magician. That statement doubled Elraldo's anger, so he went all Kamehameha and unleashed all his magic on Ard, only for Ard to dispel it with a flick of his wrist. He then told Elraldo that he was going to show him what true power looked like and unleashed a real mega flame. Unable to handle the heat, Elraldo begged that Ard spare his life. Ard listened, and with a snap of his fingers, the flames disappeared, leaving Elraldo completely unharmed. As he examined himself in confusion, Ard approached him and menacingly told him never to mistake parlor tricks for real magic again. Suddenly, Irina hugged Ard, excitedly praising him, while Ginny nervously thanked Ard for standing up for her. He claimed he hadn't really done anything, so Olivia laughed loudly and asked if he was always so humble. Ard instantly froze because he'd actually forgotten she was there, but she didn't seem to notice and instead pointed out that he pulled off a double cast, a skill considered lost. She then said he was very intriguing and swore that she would uncover his secrets soon enough, leaving Ard worried. The next day, Olivia gathered the students and asked them to form groups. Everyone wanted to be in Ard and Irina's group, but they decided to join forces with Ginny instead. After all the groups were formed, Olivia took them into a dungeon and instructed them to find and slay a black wolf, which the students complained was a high-ranking monster. Ard then led the girls away, and a few minutes later, they encountered a black wolf pack. Ginny fell to the ground in fear, but Ard and Irina burned the wolves to a crisp, forgetting that they had to take the hide back so they could be graded. Seeing this, Ginny began apologizing, saying she was just another Sakura, but Irina and Ard assured her that it wasn't true. Ard then offered to teach her how to cast a Gigaflare spell, but Ginny couldn't do it and became even more depressed. When she started bad-mouthing herself, Ard realized that all the years of abuse had taken her confidence away, so he decided he would find a way to fix it. Just then, another black wolf appeared, so Ard unleashed a spell neither of the girls had seen before. When they asked him what it was, he revealed it was his own creation, called script magic. He explained that it worked by gathering the mana in the air and incorporating it into a magic circle. With his encouragement, Ginny tried it and was excited when it worked against another black wolf. She then hugged Ard's arm, and as he praised her, Irina grabbed his other arm to remind him that they still needed to skin the wolf. As they approached the wolf, they fell through a trapdoor and ended up in the dungeon boss's room. The monster was a minotaur, and when it tried to flatten Ard, he stopped the club using a finger, then punched it into a wall, before burying it under multiple script magic spells. When it began struggling to break free, he instructed Ginny to finish it off, but the girl hesitated, doubting that she could pull it off. Ard assured her that she could, and with his encouragement, she succeeded. Ard congratulated Ginny, while Irina praised her so much that tears filled her eyes. Later on, when they left the dungeon, they presented the Minotaur's horns to Olivia, and she wasn't even shocked. However, when the girls mentioned that Ard had taught them to use script magic, Olivia's brows rose. Ard quickly tried to cover it up, claiming their victory was a group effort, but Elraldo cut him off to mock him. Ginny demanded that he apologize, and when he refused, she punched him into a tree. Irina then dumped the basket of hides on him, and as the girls laughed, Ard watched them with pride until Olivia tapped his shoulder and said they needed to talk. Fortunately, it wasn't what he was thinking, as she took him to the headmaster, who begged him to participate in the upcoming student battle event. He said the queen was coming to the academy and they needed to show off their best techniques if they wanted to secure more funding. Ard refused, saying that it was against his principles to Aura Farm. He was going to say more, but Olivia cut him off and shared that her idiot brother had once told her the same thing. However, she never got to ask why before he went and got himself reincarnated without permission. Art ignored her and told the headmaster that he would reconsider his response. While the old man was pleased with this, Olivia swore to Art that she would uncover who he truly was. On his way back to class, Art pondered whether or not to say yes to the offer. He feared that his refusal would cost him his position at the academy, but accepting it could expose his identity to Olivia. Before he could decide, Ginny suddenly ran up to him and asked if he'd go on a date with her after school. Art tried to refuse, but when he saw how hopeful she looked, he agreed to the date. Just then, Irina jumped between them and demanded that they bring her along. Surprisingly, Ginny agreed, saying she was in full support of Ard becoming a harem lord. Dumb Irina had no idea what she meant, so Ginny whispered an explanation in her ear, causing her to heat up like a boiling kettle. She then started protesting, but Ginny insisted that it was Ard's calling and that baddies would flock to him like sheep. Later in the day, Ard and Irina met Ginny, and after he did the gentlemanly thing by complimenting their outfits, they went into the theater. The play was about Varvatos, and despite the girls clinging to him like he was their lifeline, Ard paid attention to the play. Everything was going well until they began reenacting a scene involving Lydia. They made her seem gentle and kind, but Ard clearly remembered Lydia being a war-crazed nutjob. Nevertheless, the rest of the play stayed true to the source material, and when it ended, Ard and the girls left the theater. Ginny admitted that if Ard hadn't been with them, she'd have dozed off a couple of times. She then began rubbing up against him as though she was thanking him, but the jealous Irina pulled on his other arm. She suggested they get some food, and Ginny assured them that she knew a good spot. On their way there, they passed an alley and happened to overhear some hooded men discussing plans to capture the queen. Art immediately ordered them to go on without him, but they refused and insisted on accompanying him. Unable to change their minds, Art agreed, and the trio trailed the men to the sewers. There, they saw a large magic circle drawn on the wall, and Ard said he recognized it. Just then, more hooded men showed up and revealed that Ard and the girls had fallen into their trap, but Ard looked at them as if it were old news. The guy in charge then began threatening them, but Ard told him to pipe down, pointing out that they hadn't lured them there to unalive them. The man commended Ard's deduction skills, but the next moment, he attacked him with a fire spell. Apparently, Ard wasn't included in the no-slay list, so they weren't obligated to keep him alive. However, when they saw that Ard was unharmed and that he had destroyed the magic circle, the lackeys started panicking. Their leader told them not to be wimps, reminding them that they outnumbered Ard, so he was the one who ought to be afraid. At this, the men locked in again and tried to attack, but he took them out with a lightning spell. Only the leader was left standing, and when Ard began questioning him, he replied like a dedicated henchman, then suddenly transformed into a demon. However, he didn't attack Ard and blasted a hole through the ceiling so he could escape. Ard instructed the girls to remain there while he went after the guy, but they told him he could do little on foot. At this, Ard revealed that he could fly, and as the girls stared at him in awe, they asked how he was doing it. He told them it was an old trick he'd learned, making it sound like the most normal thing in the world. After his explanation, he went after the demon, who by the way, hadn't gotten to the surface yet, and hit it with a fire spell. Still, the demon kept going, and once it emerged from the sewers looking like a blowtorch, the people began testing their vocals. Unfazed, the cowardly demon grabbed a hostage to use against Ard, but the boy decided to do some crowd control before attending to him. He introduced himself to the people as the son of the heroes, and asked them to remain calm while he showed hospitality to their guest. This annoyed the demon, so he reminded Ard that he couldn't hurt him because he had a hostage. Ard responded, asking what hostage he was speaking about, and that's when the stupid demon realized that his bargaining power had been taken away. Confused, he demanded that Ard tell him how he did it, and the former demon lord told him that he used a simple illusion spell. After hearing this, the demon realized he was cooked, so he attacked Ard with a lightning spell and tried to escape, but Ard retaliated with another spell, which sent the demon flying as soon as it touched him. Ard then came back down, and as the people cheered for him, Irina and Ginny climbed out of the sewer, looking confused. Days later, Ard and the girls stood before the queen, but Irina got into an argument with the queen's advisor because she didn't address the queen properly. After a few seconds of back and forth, Irina revealed that she and the queen were besties. At this, Rosie, the queen, laughed and told her advisor to chill out before he went bald. She then addressed Ard and told him that his reward for defeating the demon was to marry her because she wanted to be his baby mama. Everyone was shocked by her words, but Irina recovered quickly and began protesting. Ginny, on the other hand, was pleased and even urged Rosie to become the third member of their harem. Eventually, everyone relaxed, and Rosie revealed that Ard's real reward was a promotion to Pentagon class mage. It was the third highest mage ranking in the kingdom, but Ard refused, saying he would prefer it if she increased the academy's funding instead. In response, Rose decreed that he would be given both things, prompting her advisor to protest. To keep the peace, Rosie said she'd also promote Irina and have both her and Ard work for her. She had an elite force known as the Queen's Shadow, who all reported directly to her. Ard and Irina accepted her offer, but then Irina asked that Ginny be rewarded as well, so Rosie promoted her to a triangle class mage, the lowest mage ranking there was. Meanwhile, in another location, the remnants of the hooded criminals met and said that even though Ard was strong, he couldn't measure up to their master, who would soon be revived. The next day, a female student confessed her feelings to Ard, only to be rejected on the spot. The next moment, she went cuckoo crazy, but Irina showed up just then and put her in her place. After she ran off like a scared little mouse, Ard tried to thank Irina, but the elf ignored him and started walking away. At the same time, in the headmaster's office, he informed Jessica, another teacher, that Ard wouldn't participate in the battle event. The woman was disappointed, but she said it was okay since the queen had already given them the money. The headmaster then revealed that the real reason he wanted Ard to participate in the event was to prove to the rest of the faculty that Ard was worthy of joining their ranks. Hearing this, Jessica agreed that Ard would be a good teacher and asked the headmaster to allow her to try to convince Ard to join the event. That night, Ard lay in bed, trying to figure out why Irina was ignoring him, but then someone knocked on the door. Believing it was Irina, he quickly opened it, only to discover Ginny standing there instead. The girl had come there to entice him, but the clueless virgin lord told her to cover up, so she didn't catch a cold. Shocked by his level of density, Ginny moved to his bed and said she wanted to show him how adults had fun. Not surprisingly, the dumb guy still didn't understand what she was going on about. So Ginny decided to take what she wanted by using her powers on him, and Ard discovered that he couldn't move. She then pushed him down and tried to kiss him, but Irina, the plot blocker, barged in at that moment and got pissed. However, her anger was directed at poor Ard, and as she threw things at him, she cursed him out more than a sailor would. When she eventually calmed down, Ginny teased her, saying she was throwing a tantrum like an overpampered brat. She then asked why Irina had come to see Ard at that time of night, wearing a suggestive outfit. Irina shyly explained that she'd come to apologize for her earlier behavior and had put on the dress because Ard's mother had said that it was the best way to get a guy to fold. Ard couldn't believe his mother had become a plot advisor, but Ginny laughed, saying that Irina's innocence was cute. Unable to control her tongue, Irina admitted that Ginny was the reason why she was acting so jealous and moody. She believed that if Ginny hadn't started flirting publicly with Ard, none of the other girls would be bold enough to approach him. Ginny argued that she was just insecure since she couldn't keep Ard satisfied, and that pissed Irina off. To reclaim her honor, she challenged Ginny to a duel, and the two started arguing until Ard intervened and made them sit on the floor. Both girls felt embarrassed, but he didn't care and demanded that they apologize to each other. Just as they did, Jessica barged in and said that an apology wasn't enough to settle their score. She encouraged them to join the battle event, saying it would help with the headmaster's plan to make Ard a teacher. For context, she explained that Ard's ability was far greater than that of a regular student, and even some faculty members. And since he'd been training the girls, having them participate in the event would boost his chances of approval. Irina thanked her for believing in them, but said she wouldn't participate because Ard had taught them only to use their powers to help others. Ard immediately started praising her, but Jessica cut him off and asked the girls if they would like to see how Ard would look in the new teacher uniforms. As expected, the girls said yes, and the only way that would happen was if they joined the event and helped him get the position. Days later, people gathered in the school's arena to watch the battle event. Ard's parents and Weiss were the commentators, but Ard's father wasn't impressed by the contestants because he'd expected to see more muscle, while his wife was too busy observing and grading each girl's body type like some creep. Seeing how they acted gave Ard serious secondhand embarrassment, but there wasn't anything he could do. Soon, it was Irina's turn to go into the ring, and Ard started praying that she would lose so that he wouldn't become a teacher. And his prayer almost worked because Irina's opponent caught her off guard with a flame spell. When she noticed that Ard was praying, she assumed it was for her success and decided that she had to make him proud. Immediately, she got back on her feet and used spirit magic to knock down her opponent. The next match was Ginny's match, and as the girls passed each other in the hallway, Irina wished Ginny good luck, not that she needed it anyway. The girls ended up winning each round and faced off in the final, but before it kicked off, the hooded men interrupted them. They had positioned themselves around the area, and as they began turning into demons, the common folk fled. As they began smashing things up, Jessica suggested that Ard and Olivia do some damage control, but his parents and Weiss insisted on helping. On the other side, Irina and Ginny were already battling the demons and helping each other stay alive. However, things took a drastic turn when the floor exploded, turning the pieces into a golem. Their spells didn't work on it, and as they tried to figure out what to do, Weiss stepped in and instructed them to step back. Once they complied, he took down the golem using a wind spell, so Irina began praising him. Suddenly, Jessica showed up behind Weiss and stabbed him through the chest with her hand. Irina quickly rushed to her father's side, and when Ginny began demanding answers, Jessica revealed that she was Elzard, the frenzied king of dragons. She had come there specifically for Irina and wasn't going to leave without her. At this, Ginny attacked Elzard and screamed at Irina to run, but none of her attacks touched Elzard because she had put up a barrier. She then knocked Ginny out with a spell, and when she tried to finish her off, Irina begged her not to. She said she would go anywhere with Elzard as long as she spared Ginny's life, and so Elzard knocked her out and flew off without anyone noticing. A little while later, Weiss woke up to find Ard treating his wound, so he revealed that the frenzied king of dragons had kidnapped his daughter. Ard said they had to find them as soon as possible, but the headmaster was against the idea. He didn't think that Ard was powerful enough to take Elzard on, but Ard said he didn't care as long as he could save Irina. Weiss backed Ard but said that Ard had to go along with his plan. Later, he took Ard to the royal treasury and asked him to pick out any weapon he wanted. Ard did, and after he left, his father asked Weiss if he'd tell Ard the truth. Weiss reminded him about how Irina had always been introverted and socially awkward before meeting Ard. He feared that if Ard found out the truth, he would leave Irina and she would return to her former self. Ironically, Irina's subconscious shared her father's view, so she dreamt that Ard disappeared from her life after she told him the truth. In that moment, she jerked away and realized that she was tied up inside a magic cage. When Elzard saw that she was awake, she revealed that she'd taken her because of her blood, surprising Irina, who always thought that her secret was a secret. Elzard didn't offer her an explanation and instead motioned behind Irina towards a monster. It was called the Orphan of Chaos and had been created using the flesh of an evil god that the demon Lord Varvatos had once defeated. She planned to sacrifice Irina to the monster and use it to summon another evil god, which had been sealed away many years ago. Apparently, she was dissatisfied with how soft and relaxed the world had become and wanted to destroy it. Irina told Elzard that Ard would never allow her to succeed, but the evil woman just laughed. She acknowledged that Ard was powerful, but said that once he found out Irina's secret, he wouldn't want anything to do with her. Irina couldn't argue about this, and just as the monster was about to introduce her to its stomach acids, it suddenly caught fire and burned to ashes. The one who set it ablaze was Ard, and after he floated down to the floor, he activated a magic circle. The demons tried to flee when they realized that he'd activated a 9 cast, but it was too late, and they got taken out. Ard then freed Irina and promised to get her out. Elzard laughed and told Ard to reconsider his decision, since Irina wasn't who she claimed to be. She was actually the descendant of evil gods, and her real name was Laval. At that same time, Ard's father and Weiss were discussing the truth about Weiss's family. It turned out that they were the real royal family and that all of them were descended from evil gods. They chose to operate in the shadows because, if people discovered their identity, they would rebel against them, as the people hated evil gods. Back in the stronghold, Ard told Elzard that he didn't care who Irina was because she was the kindest and most courageous person he'd ever met. In fact, Elzard, referring to her as a monster, was the highest form of insult, and he would never forgive her for it. Elzard replied that she couldn't wait to see the look of despair on Ard's face when she got rid of Irina. The next moment, she attacked them with a spell, only to be shocked when she saw that they were unharmed. As she tried to figure out how he protected them without a barrier, she noticed the spear in his hand. Immediately, she clocked that it was a magic item, so Ard spared her the mental trouble by revealing that it could nullify magic spells, especially lightning. This pissed Elzard off, so she struck his surroundings, trying to throw him off balance, but that didn't work either. When she came back down, Ard hit her with his Giga Flare spell, then followed up with the spear, sending her flying into the clouds. Irina then hugged Ard excitedly, praising him for working fast, but he told her that things were just getting started. On cue, Elzard took on her dragon form and returned to take revenge on Ard for disrespecting her. Ard complained that she was like a cockroach and then set up a barrier around himself and Irina. When Elzard began attacking, Ard instructed Irina to close her eyes because things were about to get messy. He then began chanting until a golden magic circle appeared, projecting an image of Lydia. It defended against Elzard's attacks, and when the dragon began losing morale, he snapped his fingers, and the projection turned into a sword. He grabbed it and flew to challenge Elzard, but she used the clouds to hide her presence. Unfortunately for her, the sword was basically a magic detector, and it snitched each time she tried to attack from underneath the clouds. After dodging a few times, Ard retaliated with fire spells, but Elzard dodged each one. The only thing was that she finally acknowledged that she'd underestimated Ard and said he was the true monster. She also tried to play mind games by adding that Irina would stay away from him now that he revealed his true powers. However, Irina proved her wrong when she screamed at Ard and told him not to lose to an over-evolved dinosaur. Immediately, Ard snapped out of his thoughts and transformed into Varvatos. After this, every attack Elzard tried backfired, enraging her even further, so Ard put her out of her misery by finishing her off with a spell called Ultimate Zero. When he came back down, he feared that Irina would shy away from him, but she began glazing him and calling the strongest anime protagonist ever to exist. Just to be sure, Ard asked if she was cool with them still being friends, and Irina confirmed that she was. He then said it was time to return to school, and as he began walking away, Irina told herself that she had to level up soon or else she wouldn't be fit to stand by Ard's side. Days later, in a dungeon somewhere, a girl named Sylphie defeated a minotaur using a magic sword. She then declared that, after spending 3 years in that dungeon, she was finally strong enough to help her big sister, Lydia, However, when she arrived in the city, she was more confused and lost than a boyfriend at a channel store because everything had changed. When she almost got run over by carriages, she rushed into an alley and began wondering what in the time skip had happened. Just then, a masked guy approached her from the shadows and commended her for dedicating 3,000 years to training in the dungeons. That revelation short-circuited Sylphie's shock meter, so the guy asked if she hadn't been aware that time moved differently inside that dungeon. Sylphie claimed that she had known, and quickly stirred the conversation to how much the world had changed. Her masked companion agreed, but said that things had become a bit boring and started walking away. Sylphie chased after him and asked how Varvatos was doing, and the guy revealed that the demon lord had died and reincarnated. However, he had abandoned his responsibilities and was now trying and failing to live as an insignificant commoner. Before Sylphie could overcome her shock, the guy told her that if she wanted to know about Lydia, she should go to Ard. Meanwhile, Ard was at the academy speaking with the headmaster and the girls. The school festival and the academy's 100th anniversary were happening around the same time, and aside from the sword tournament, he wanted the students to put on a play. The only problem was that he had received a letter demanding that the celebrations be cancelled or face consequences. They received letters like that every year, but this particular one was more worrisome. Ard asked whether it was because the message had been written on parchment made from human skin, or because the sender was Lars Al Ghul. Irina reacted in shock at the name, but she didn't say anything. The headmaster then told Ard that he wanted him to participate in the play and patrol the grounds, so that he could help if the blackmailer carried out their threat. When the girls expressed their interest, Ard refused, saying it would be dangerous. The girls argued that they weren't helpless heroines and assured Ard that they would be fine if a fight broke out. The headmaster also added that Olivia was already recruiting volunteers. Later in class, Irina and Ginny discussed the play excitedly while Ard just watched them. Suddenly, someone screamed his name, and the next second, Sylphie barged into the classroom and started harassing the students, trying to find him. Right before things escalated, Olivia whacked the tiny terror on the head with a notebook, and she fell. When she started complaining that Olivia was a bully, Olivia told her that it was her fault for still being an immature brat after 3,000 years. Ard shook his head in agreement, and unfortunately, Sylphie noticed. So she pointed at him and asked if he was the demon lord's reincarnation. She also asked what happened to Lydia and the evil gods, and said she wasn't leaving without an answer. Ard just stared at the peepsqueak in utter disbelief because she pretty much just blew his cover. Irina told her not to be absurd, since Ard could never be the demon lord Varvatos, but Ginny said it made sense, since the guy was basically the most overpowered person they knew. As for Olivia, she asked Sylphie to tell her everything she'd learned, but Sylphie ignored her and threatened to beat Ard up if he didn't come clean. Before Ard could respond, Irina spoke up, and Sylphie piped down because Irina reminded her of Lydia. Curiously, she asked who she was, and Irina proudly answered that she was Ard's best friend. Sylphie then declared that she would also be her friend. Irina immediately declined, which hurt Sylphie, so she angrily told Ard that she would still fight him. At this, Olivia announced that the day's lesson would be changed to sword fighting. Ard immediately protested, but Sylphie began mocking him, saying she knew he was a spineless wimp. Ard tried to ignore the jab, but his face couldn't hide his feelings, so Olivia asked why he was hesitating. Ard easily clocked what she was trying to do, so he had no choice but to agree to the duel. Outside, Irina began cheering him on, causing Sylphie to become jealous and attack Ard. He quickly dodged and ensured that he only matched her strikes with minimal effort. Sylphie assumed he was afraid and began trash-talking him to bring down his morale. However, all that did was piss him off, so he decided to end things, only for the universe to turn things. When Sylphie attempted to stab him, he blocked the attack, and when she pushed her back, her sword broke, prompting Olivia to declare him the winner. Sylphie refused to accept the result, so she angrily summoned her sword and attacked him. Ard quickly created a barrier, and the attack bounced off it and hit a building. Seeing that he was unharmed, Sylphie moved to attack him again, so Ard prepared to defend himself by creating magic circles. Just then, Olivia called out to Sylphie to stop, and that was when she realized that the students had gotten caught in the crossfire. However, instead of admitting her faults, she claimed that what she'd done was nothing compared to what the demon lord had done in the past. The next second, Irina rewarded her with a factory reset smack on the back of her head and told her that it was common sense to accept one's faults and apologize. At that moment, Sylphie saw Lydia, so she crumbled to the ground, crying and apologizing. Irina was kind enough to comfort her, saying that all was fine as long as she accepted that she was wrong. As Ard watched them, he also saw Lydia and was very shocked. Days later, he addressed his classmates about the upcoming festival and sword tournament. He said their class was in charge of the play, and after a few back and forths, they decided which play they would do and who would take each role. As for their class attraction, Ginny suggested a maid cafe and even showed them the outfits she had designed. Ard immediately voiced his disapproval because the outfits were far too suggestive for polite company. Ginny assured him that those designs were the most modest ones she had. The other male students seemed to like them for obvious reasons, but the female students sided with Ard and said they wouldn't wear them. That was until Ginny told them that it could be their ticket to winning Ard over. Now, it was the boys' turn to be upset because the Riz demon had once again stolen all the attention without even trying. Ard, on the other hand, was forced to sign off on the outfits, and when Sylphie started complaining, he told her that only the volunteers volunteers had to wear them. Ginny also added that the spot was open only to melon queens, prompting Sylphie to demand justice for plotless baddies. While that chaos was unfolding, nobody noticed a bird watching from a tree branch. That bird was acting as the masked guy's surveillance drone, and he laughed, saying he couldn't wait to see Sylphie's reaction when she learned the truth. A few days later, the festival kicked off, and Ard patrolled the school with Irina while pretending to be just trying the food. Irina was very excited, so she pulled a willing Ard everywhere to buy what she fancied. Just as they got some shaved ice, an explosion occurred in another area. Sylphie was the culprit, and she was in the middle of threatening the poor stall owner, whom she believed was a demon in disguise. When Ard and Irina arrived, they asked her for proof of what she was saying, and the airhead said the man's eyes were a dead giveaway. Just then, Olivia arrived and revealed that the man was a staff member at the restaurant she visited frequently. When she mentioned that he'd even taught her how to fry potatoes, Ard wondered just how low his general had fallen. As for Sylphie, she apologized for her mistake, but Olivia told her that she was off the patrol team. She immediately started pouting, so Irina told her that she could help their classmates set up the cafe. As Sylphie walked away dejectedly, Irina looked at the large tree sitting pretty in the center of the place and said it always gave her the creeps. Rumor had it that the Great Sword King had sealed something special inside the tree, but Irina said even her father didn't know what it was. Olivia seemed to have an idea, but she told them she couldn't discuss classified information with them and switched the topic to the sword tournament. She said that she had entered the tournament and casually informed Ard that she'd submitted a form for him as well. The shocked boy tried to get out of it by reminding her that he was participating in the play, but Olivia told him to multitask. When he kept trying to make excuses, she cut him off and said that if he didn't participate, she would make her own decision and act on a certain matter. Since that was a clear threat, Ard had no choice but to agree. Later in the day, Ard went to check on the cafe, but the moment he turned the doorknob, Sylphie kicked a guy through the wall. Apparently, he tapped her non-existent backside, and she was out for blood. Ard quickly intervened before she made the guy history, and with the snap of his finger, he bound the degenerate and fixed the wall. He then scolded Sylphie for going too far, but when he turned to leave, two girls begged him to stay for a while. Ard tried to refuse, but then Ginny walked out and convinced him to change his mind. Upon entering the room, he was greeted by the maids, who asked whether he would be interested in sampling their goods. Ard turned red with embarrassment and politely asked for a cup of juice to cool down. Just then, an angry Irina stormed over and asked how he could be playing master when she was out patrolling the grounds like a guard dog. Ginny told her to pipe down and explained that Ard was only there to reap the fruits of his labor. At this, Irina said she wanted in, so Ginny provided her with a costume. She then announced that she would be the only one to attend to Ard, but Ginny told her not to be greedy, and the other girls agreed. When they started arguing over Ard, the address system cackled to life, and it was announced that the sword tournament would kick off the next day. When it was announced that the grand prize would be a replica of the Holy Sword, Sylphie declared that she would enter the tournament. Irina said she would also give it a shot, and when Ginny learned that Ard was already participating, she announced her intention to join. However, she let it slip that she just wanted an excuse to get all sweaty with Ard, so another round of argument began. The next day, people gathered at the arena to watch the tournament, and the commentator announced that they had 3 extraordinary contestants. Irina and Ard were the first 2, while the third was Olivia, the founder of swordsmanship. However, Sylphie became disappointed when her name wasn't mentioned, even though she was so sure she was relevant. When the matches began, Irina schooled her opponent on the basics of swordsmanship and won. Sylphie also showed off her skill and ended her match quickly. As for Olivia, she won by default because her opponent was too scared to face her. When it was Ard's turn, he made quick work of his opponents like the ladies had done and emerged victorious. Ginny was the only one whose match didn't end in a flash because she got overpowered by her opponent at the start. It wasn't until Ard called out to her, encouraging her not to give up, that she got back in the zone and finished off her opponent. After the match, one of their classmates asked Irina to return to the cafe to help as they were short-staffed. Ginny then exited the arena with Ard and invited him to watch the Miss and Mr. pageant she was participating in. Ard agreed, since he could use the chance to patrol that side of the academy, and Ginny was happy. A little while later, while Ard waited for the pageant to begin, he looked around and was surprised to see that Elraldo had become a fatso. However, he chose to mind his business, and just then, Ginny walked on stage to introduce herself. While she did her thing, Elraldo began telling Ard about his past with Ginny. As he said before, her family served him, even though her father was a count. His father was the most condescending person ever to live, and he taught Elraldo to look down on those who weren't in the same class as them. Ginny suffered his cruelty the most because she was an easy target, but after getting beaten by Ard, he realized he wasn't all that. Now, he turned a new leaf and felt even more fulfilled. After telling his story, he left, and the pageant continued. But surprisingly, Ginny and Ard were announced as the winners at the end. When they returned to their class, they showed Irina their trophy, and the girl couldn't help but feel jealous that she hadn't been involved. Later on, the tournament continued, and Ard faced off against Olivia. The battle was intense, but then Olivia decided to provoke Ard, so he retaliated by knocking her out of the arena with a spell. Since magic was prohibited in the tournament, he was disqualified, and their match had no winner. Soon, it was Ginny and Irina's turn, and somehow they turned it into a duel over Ard. They agreed that the winner would get Ard, and poor Ginny lost to Irina. Later in the day, they all retired to their dorms, still oblivious to the fact that the creep in the mask was watching them. The next day, Ard and the others kicked off the festival with their class play, and as the play progressed, everyone enjoyed themselves except Ard, who was cringing hard because he was playing himself. Watching the people cheer for him reminded him of the battle against Avia. On that day, before the battle began, he went over their strategy and asked if there were any objections. Sylphie raised her hand. She said she didn't trust him to have Lydia's 6, but Lydia told her to shut up. As she tried to explain her point, Avia called out to them from his balcony, saying he was giving them the grace of that day to do whatever they wanted, because the next day, he'd send all of them to the other side. When he started laughing, Ard and his people remained quiet, choosing not to exchange words with the muscle-headed buffalo. That night, while Varvatos lay watching the stars, Sylphie crawled over to him and asked if he thought she was useless. He told her that he and Lydia were aware of her capabilities and were only hard on her because they didn't want her to get hurt. Sylphie swore that she would tone down her craziness as long as she could be allowed to assist her sister, so Varvatos gave her permission to act as she wanted on the battlefield. He said he would take responsibility for her actions, making Sylphie so happy that she hugged him. The next day, both armies gathered for the decisive battle, and just as they were about to clash, Avia and his men accidentally activated the traps Sylphie had set up the night before. This allowed Lydia to cut Asha down and secure their win. The only problem was that the idiot Sylphie had set up traps in every nook and cranny of the field, but couldn't remember their exact location, so Varvatos sucker punched her. Eventually, as the sun began setting, the army dragged itself back to camp, but Sylphie kept complaining about how they treated her. When Varvatos tried to punish her again, Lydia intervened, saying it wouldn't stop Sylphie from being an idiot. Back in the present, the play concluded, and during the curtain call, Ginny noticed that Sylphie was missing. They soon spotted her chasing after someone who resembled Lydia, only to get disappointed when she realized it wasn't her sister. As she began feeling sad, the masked guy stepped in front of her, but didn't say a word. The next day, while Ginny and Ard were guarding the entrance to the arena, Ard said it was strange that Sylphie hadn't shown up yet. Ginny told him about Irina's earlier observation that Sylphie was acting strangely after the play and immediately assumed it had something to do with feelings. Ard told her that not everything was related to feelings, but Ginny was convinced that Sylphie had fallen for Ard and was now avoiding him. Just then, Sylphie arrived, and she swore that she would win the tournament and asked Ard to meet her by the Sword King's tree after the closing ceremony. After she walked away, Ginny wished Ard luck, but he told her he didn't need it. Soon, the final match between Sylphie and Irina began, but instead of attacking with her sword, she moved close and knocked her out with a hand chop to the back of her head. This was an odd turn of events, but Sylphie was still declared the winner. Ard couldn't help but wonder what was happening because he knew Sylphie like the back of his hand. That night, while the celebration was in full swing, Sylphie waited by the Sword King's tree for Ard. At the same time, Irina hid in the bushes to spy on them. Initially, Irina didn't know what was happening, but after Ginny explained, she immediately tried to intervene, but Ginny held her back. Eventually, Ard arrived, and Sylphie told him that after much deliberation, she had decided to exterminate him. The next second, the sword in her hand started glowing along with the tree, and Ard realized that the sword was the real deal. It once belonged to Lydia, and was what the Sword King sealed away inside the tree. Sylphie said it was ironic that no one had figured it out before and that she had finally achieved one of her goals. Surprisingly, the words spewing out of Sylphie's mouth weren't hers but those of the masked guy. The next moment, she summoned her own sword, and as she chanted a spell to unleash her powers, Ard clutched his chest. After she did a quick Winx Club transformation, she began attacking Ard, but he didn't fight back. Instead, he took to the sky and flew off, but Sylphie chased him to continue her assault. Ginny and Irina were left wondering what was going on, while the masked guy laughed, saying that things were finally getting interesting. The previous day, when he met Sylphie, she didn't believe what he told her about Ard's identity. The guy called her a blind fool, and said that since she wouldn't act, he would have to force her to dance to his tune. The next moment, he placed his hand on her head and showed her what happened to her sister 3,000 years ago. As the shocked girl tried to process that information, the guy manipulated her and controlled her mind to believe that she had to unalive Ard. Speaking of Ard, Sylphie managed to cut him with her sword, and he fell from the sky. She immediately began celebrating her victory, but then became sad again when she remembered that her sister was gone. Suddenly, that sadness turned into rage, and when she began powering up the swords to go on a rampage, Irina arrived and scolded her, but Sylphie didn't care and charged at her, forcing Irina to put up a barrier. The next moment, Ginny hit Sylphie with a fireball, so Sylphie retaliated by kicking her. Seeing this, Irina declared that she would set Sylphie straight, but the girl was too brainwashed to care. As she charged at Irina, Ard, who had transformed into Varvatos, called out to her to stop. The transformation triggered Sylphie even more, so she tried to attack him. Ard defended himself, and just as he was about to knock her out, Lydia called out to Sylphie to stop. As they tried to figure out where the voice came from, the masked guy revealed himself. He said it was a shame that Sylphie had proved useless to his cause. Ard asked what he wanted, and he said he was there to get rid of him, because he was a roadblock in their grand plan to revive their lord. He then picked up the sword swords and tried to recreate the classic anime sword run strike, only to get slashed. When he attempted to retaliate, Ard cut off one of his arms and told him that he was unworthy of wielding Lydia's sword. Since the guy still had Sylphie's sword, he tried to activate it, but it rejected him and electrocuted him. Once the sword fell, Ard swiped it and used it to finish the guy off. He then tried to pick up Lydia's sword, but her soul emerged from his and went to comfort Sylphie. She told her that it wasn't Varvatos's fault that she was gone and urged her sister to live her life to the fullest until they met again. Weeks later, Ard and his classmates set out on a road trip, and to pass the time, he played a card game with Ginny and Irina. Irina was enjoying herself because she was winning, but Ginny kept sulking. When she noticed that her card had Elzard's image on it, she threw it down and began stomping on it. Ard couldn't help but feel bad for the frenzied king, and as he stared at the cards in his hand, time stopped. However, he and the girls were the ones who didn't stop with it. The next moment, they fell into a void and were approached by a boy with white hair. Ard asked if he was a demon, and the boy suddenly appeared behind him, whispering that he was a god. Shocked by the unexpected invasion, Ard moved away and asked why he brought them there. The god explained that someone was attempting to disrupt the world's balance, and he wanted them eliminated before they became a problem. However, he warned that once Ard encountered this person, one of them would disappear forever, and said he hoped Ard would be the one who survived. As he began walking away, Ard and the girls suddenly found themselves in the past. Ard confirmed the timeline, noting that there were 2 moons in the sky, and explained that the future would have only 1 moon because a canon event had occurred. He also confirmed that the timeline they were in was the one where the demon lord Varvatos ruled. So, he suggested they seek an audience with him, as he might help them find the person the god had told them about. At this, Ginny took his hand and asked whether they would be able to return home after fulfilling their mission, and he told her he could only hope so. Seeing how close they were, Irina grew jealous, so she pushed up against Ard and pretended to be curious about something. As soon as Ginny figured out her game, she decided to play as well, causing poor Ard to become uncomfortable. Fortunately, he was saved from the war of plots when a scream suddenly sounded nearby. When they went to investigate, they spotted a girl fleeing from what Ard identified as a death stinger. Without hesitation, he swung into action and, after protecting her with a barrier, he used script magic to destroy the monster. As the girls began praising him, Olivia approached, carrying the girl they had just saved. So Irina and Ginny excitedly called her name. Olivia instantly grew suspicious, and when she asked whether they had met before, Ard claimed they were big fans of hers. Of course, she didn't believe him, so she unleashed a wind spell, which knocked the girls out instantly. Ard wasn't the least bit affected, and when she asked how that happened, he told her that Gojo's infinity had nothing on him. Intrigued, she asked him to pick up the girls and come with her. Later in the city, the girls looked around in awe, and when Olivia rejoined them, Ard asked why she brought them with her. Olivia explained that she wanted him to join the fight against the demons. She assured him that they weren't losing since Varvatos had created magic, but she wouldn't mind the extra hand after seeing what Ard could do. Ard told her to admit she just wanted to keep him under surveillance, but then agreed to join her ranks if she would include the girls and put them under Verda's command. Olivia couldn't understand why they wanted to work with a non-combatant, so Ard explained that they were magic scholars. At this, Olivia saw no reason to argue and accepted the deal. When they arrived at Verda's lab, Ginny and Irina grew nervous, wondering how she would be, but Ard said nothing. The next moment, an explosion occurred, and the entire lab collapsed, but when Verda emerged from the rubble, she seemed excited. She said the explosion was a result of her genius, but since the girls didn't know who she was, they asked if Verda wouldn't be pissed. Verda proudly revealed her identity, and the girls' reaction was comical because they immediately checked the photo cards in their possession. Feeling insulted, Verda turned around and restored the lab before leading them inside. Once they were all seated, she asked if they were her fans, but then started laughing at her own question. When she finally stopped, she asked why they had chosen to serve under her, and Ard explained their situation. As soon as he finished speaking, Verda became excited again and promised to help them return home. Just as she was about to tell them what she wanted in return, Sylphie barged in and tried to hit her, but Verda kept jumping out of the way. Unable to keep up, Sylphie stopped and called for Lydia, whose entrance left Ard frozen in place. As for Ginny and Irina, they tried to act cool, but that was hard, seeing as they were in the presence of the legendary champion. But Lydia didn't notice their reactions as she was focused on Verda. She grabbed the mad scientist and shook her before demanding that she send more troops to the front lines. Verda pointed out that she already sent reserves to Lydia, but Lydia said they were not enough. She felt as though something was going to happen and wanted to be prepared to counter it. Hearing this, Verda asked her to take Ard and the girls. Lydia immediately tried to refuse, but then she turned around and noticed that Ginny was blessed by the melon goddess. In a split second, she went from aggressive thug to Rizzler and asked Ginny if she'd like to come back to her villa so they could get to know each other better. Her forwardness made Ginny all shy and nervous, and that was just the sort of thing Lydia liked. She pulled her against herself and started playing with her behind, causing Ginny to blush harder and try to pull away. Seeing this, Ard intervened and told Lydia to stop being a shameless skirt chaser, but Lydia argued that he was trying to interfere with her love life and challenged him to a duel. Irina and Ginny immediately advised him to refuse, but Ard assured them that he would be fine and followed Lydia outside. Once they were there, Lydia attacked Ard, but he matched her attacks, and they kept going until evening. When they finally had enough, Lydia asked Ard to consider joining her support unit with the girls. She said she could tell he wanted to avoid the front lines at all costs, but she really needed him on her team. Instead of agreeing, Ard asked if she could help him get an audience with Varvatos, and she told him that the demon lord wouldn't agree to meet with him. However, she advised him to do something that would make Varvatos notice him and eventually win his trust, because Varvatos only lets those he trusts get close to him. That night, while Ginny was soaking in the bath at Lydia's villa, Lydia came out of nowhere and asked if they could wash each other's backs. Meanwhile, Ard was standing outside when Lydia's maid, Latimer, came to inform him that they would stay in the villa until the next expedition. She urged him to feel free and treat the place as if it belonged to a close friend, so Ard thanked her, and she walked away. Now alone, he wondered if he had the right to call Lydia his friend still when he was the one who took her life. His mind grew heavy with guilt until the sounds coming from the bathroom distracted him. A few days later, while Lydia and Sylphie led their army into battle, Ard and the girls waited with Verda's army at the camp. When the battle began, Lydia and Sylphie took charge, and things went smoothly. Those who had been injured were brought back to be treated by the medics, so Ginny told Irina they had to make sure the medics got the supply boxes. They were still discussing this when an enemy commander suddenly started attacking everyone using lightning. The girls instantly became afraid, since they hadn't expected the enemy to breach the camp. Ard was also surprised, but then he figured that he could use that chance to score a meeting with the demon lord, so he approached the guy. Meanwhile, Sylphie led her men to break down the door to the enemy's fortress, but Lydia noted that the enemy commander had yet to show his face, even though they had advanced into his territory. Just then, a soldier came to inform her that the Verda army had suffered a surprise attack from the enemy. When she learned that the attackers were being led by the enemy commander Bolgan, her eyes nearly bulged out. Back at the Verda camp, Bolgan approached Ard, looking all smug and confident until he and his men activated a trap set by Ard. The moment his body hit the ground, Lydia and Sylphie came running and were surprised to see the dead man. Ard told them that Bolgan had been all bark and no bite, so he immobilized him. Hearing him address Bolgan as weak nearly took Lydia out, but she laughed and said he'd just taken down the big bad wolf she'd been chasing. Sylphie then began complaining that Ard had stolen their thunder, and Irina told her to live with it before praising Ard for being extraordinary. Ignoring them both, Lydia congratulated Ard and said it was only a matter of time until he met Varvatos. Days later, they arrived at the capital city where Varvatos lived, and as they approached his castle, Ginny and Irina began praising its architecture. Ard just sat in the corner, feeling smug and enjoying the praises his castle was receiving. Their praises didn't stop even after they entered the castle, but Smurfette claimed that Lydia's place was better. Ard just looked at her in shock, but Sylphie told him to fix his face, so he walked away, saying everything was fine. As they neared the throne room, Irina and Ginny's nerves began rising, and Ard wondered how his former self would react to the appearance of a random, powerful guy. The next moment, a fireball flew towards them, but Ard protected everyone with one of his barriers. When the smoke cleared, a guy named Alvartos approached them, saying he was only trying to welcome Ard to the big leagues. Ard thanked him for his thoughtful gesture, but Lydia suddenly got between them and told Alvartos that if he was looking to throw hands, she was available. Alvartos told her that although her offer was tempting, he was in the mood for something new. Just then, Varvatos appeared at the doorway and told them to stop using his hallway as a chat room. Seeing Varvatos in all his handsome glory overwhelmed Ginny so much that she fainted. Ard, on the other hand, just stared at his past self until Varvatos broke the silence to tell Alvartos that he hadn't sent for him. Apparently, the guy liked to bully all the recruits under the pretense of testing them, so Varvatos didn't want him around. After Alvartos left, Ard noticed that Varvatos had glanced at his girls and was instantly hit with jealousy, even though they were the same person. As they walked into the room, Lydia began teasing Varvatos, saying she knew he missed her since he was a friendless loser, but he told her not to flatter herself. Eventually, he took his throne, and some servants began fussing over him. Irina then gushed that the demon lord was better looking than she had imagined, but Ginny cautioned her not to speak so recklessly. The title of demon lord sounded strange to Varvatos, so he asked who they were talking about. Both girls immediately froze, so Ard moved to stand in front of them and explain that they were only repeating the name they had heard at the port. However, he couldn't help but wonder why his former self wasn't aware of that title. At that moment, Varvatos revealed that another demon lord existed, and Ard realized that someone was out there altering the timeline. He and the girls then apologized for the mix-up, but Ard's mind was not at rest. So, when he met Verda in her lab later, he told her what happened, and she confirmed his suspicion that someone had altered history. This made him recall what the god had told them about the person who upset the world's balance. He then told the girls that they might have misunderstood their mission statement and speculated that the god wanted them to visit Varvatos for help to defeat the demon lord. Verda then revealed the demon lord had arrived 3 years ago and had since conquered the land between Varvatos' territory and that of the demons. When Varvatos approached him for an alliance, they ended up fighting, and Varvatos lost. Ginny then proposed that they come clean to Varvatos if they wanted his help, but Ard told her not to be in a rush since they hadn't earned Varvatos' trust yet. Just then, Lydia barged in and told Ard that he would accompany her to the front lines, and he didn't even try to complain. Along the way, Lydia said it was a good call on his part to leave Ginny and Irina behind because they were going to visit Mevelas, the Cursed King. Ard froze up at this, so Sylphie began teasing him, and saying he still had time to turn around before they encountered the archdemon. Ard didn't respond, but his uneasiness didn't go away because Mevelis was the reason he had to take Lydia's life. When they eventually arrived at Mevelis's castle, a battle broke out between them and his skeleton army, but Ard destroyed them with a wind spell. When Sylphie began complaining again, he told her to quit her chit-chat and keep moving. Lydia warned him not to do anything drastic, but Ard said nothing. Just as they were about to storm the castle, an explosion occurred, setting it ablaze. When they rushed in to check, Mevelis' head came flying at them, and the fake demon lord revealed himself. He then told them to tell Varvatos that if he wanted more land, he now had to fight him for it. Lydia pointed out that he basically made a war declaration, but the demon lord didn't respond and just disappeared. Following that, they returned to Varvatos with everyone else and ended up in a meeting with him and all his generals. Each had a thing to say about the imposter, but in the end, Varvatos declared that they were going to war with the demon lord. He also ordered that his castle be destroyed in 3 days, and everyone agreed to his demand. Later, at Lydia's villa, Ard conversed with Latima, and as they discussed, he asked about Lydia. She informed him that her mistress had gone off to speak to her army, so Ard decided to remain in his room. As he sat on his bed, he began reflecting on everything that had changed since they got to the past. Those who were supposed to be dead were still alive, and Lydia didn't get cursed because Mevelis was unalive before she encountered him. He wondered if that would change anything, and tried to figure out how he was supposed to correct history. Before he could arrive at a meaningful answer, the imposter demon lord suddenly appeared in his room. The most surprising part was when he revealed his identity because he wasn't Varvatos or some rando, but Ard from another dimension. The two then got to chatting, and Ard too further revealed that it was the god who sent him back in time. However, his mission was to correct the mistake he had made in his dimension, as nothing ever worked out for him in his world. When Ard inquired what his mistake was, he said it was unaliving Lydia. He explained that he'd been riddled with guilt since the day he did it and blamed his actions on foolishness. So, he unalived himself, only to be reincarnated as Ard, and the worst part was that he still lost everything he tried to build in his new life. Thanks to those failures and his guilt that never left, he decided to end it all by sacrificing the world to ensure that Lydia stayed alive. Despite his explanation, Ard felt as though the guy was hiding something else, so he asked why he hadn't approached Varvatos and spoken to him. The imposter explained that the god had made it impossible for him, so even though he actively sought Varvatos out, nothing would come of it. He then asked Ard if he could recall how Lydia had died, and Ard said yes, wondering why the guy would ask such a stupid question in the first place. Satisfied with his response, the imposter invited him to join forces with him, saying they were in the same boat. Surprisingly, Ard considered saying yes to the proposal since he was still feeling guilty himself, but then a voice in his head warned him not to be stupid. Immediately, he hesitated, and when the imposter realized, he said he'd give him time to think about it, then pulled another disappearing act. The following morning, as Latima was taking Ard to the dining table, he suddenly asked what she'd do if she were told to choose between her life and that of Lydia's. Latima didn't think twice when she answered that Lydia's life was more valuable than hers, and asked Ard why he'd even asked such a stupid question. Just then, they reached their destination, and Ard saw that the girls were already helping themselves with the food, especially Sylphie, who was stuffing herself like a Thanksgiving turkey, and when Irina asked her to slow down, she brushed it off. According to her, she needed all the food she could get because she was a growing woman. Ginny looked at her when she said this, trying to locate signs that her body would change anytime soon. She then made a sarcastic remark which, not surprisingly, Sylphie was too dumb to decipher. When Irina noticed that Ard looked troubled, she didn't ask any questions. She just told him they were going out. As they enjoyed the sights, they happened to spot Lydia shamelessly trying to pick up girls, and Ard couldn't help but feel embarrassed on her behalf. When he called her out for her actions, Lydia got pissed and punched him, but Ard returned the favor since he was always one for gender equality. When things calmed down, Lydia asked if he was feeling better now that he'd blown off some steam since she'd noticed he was troubled. Ard refused to tell her anything for obvious reasons, so Lydia dropped the topic and took him to a haunted ruin instead. As soon as they walked in, ghosts appeared and surrounded Lydia, revealing that they had beef with her. She'd helped to suppress the demons in that area so they could clear a path to King's Castle, and was now feeling guilty. Ard tried to reassure her that she'd done what was necessary, but Lydia cut him off, saying she would have to atone for her sins someday by also dying a painful death. At this point, Ard couldn't even comment, so they returned home, only to find Ginny and Irina looking very worried. To appease them, Lydia gave them some jewelry and then pulled Sylphie's face in a teasing manner as a big sister would. However, she invited Ard to have a drink with her, saying her body was getting excited about the upcoming battle. The next day, Varvatos' generals led their forces into battle against some monsters, and, as usual, they dominated their enemies. Later that night, the imposter visited Ard again so he could hear his answer, and Ard told him he wasn't going to join his cause. This enraged the imposter, so he attacked Ard, but Ard fought back, defending himself. Their fight lasted for a few minutes, and the imposter acknowledged Ard's strength, saying he was a worthy opponent. However, he wasn't the opponent he was supposed to fight, so he left to prepare for his fight with Varvatos. When morning came, Irina and Ginny began complaining about how they had been left out of all the fighting. Ard seemed to be the only one pulling his weight, and they were starting to feel useless, but Ginny told Irina not to lose hope. She also told her to keep fighting for Ard because she badly wanted them to be harem mates, and this made both girls laugh. Just then, Latima came upon them and said said that Ard had asked her to bring them to the imposter's castle. He wanted them to destroy a certain item inside the castle, which was making him powerful and immortal. The girls immediately agreed to the quest since they wanted to help Ard, and on their way to the castle, Latima gave them more info. She said that the imposter had separated his soul from his body and sealed it away in a crystal, which he kept hidden beneath the castle. If he were unalived, only his body would die, while his soul would sit in the crystal until someone transferred it to a new body. The only way to ensure that he stayed dead was to find and destroy the crystal, and she was sure the girls could pull it off. Unfortunately, they had no way to know what awaited them inside the castle, as the crystal would obviously be heavily guarded. Irina grew afraid at the impending danger, but Ginny told her to put on her big girl pants and prove to Ard that she was reliable. While they were still in the pep talk mood, Latima noticed something behind them and tried to warn them, but she got hit instead. Still, she told them to head to the castle without her and promised she would join them once she felt better. Meanwhile, Varvatos's army was still in the middle of a heated battle, but the odds were in their favor. Back in the castle, Irina and Ginny arrived in the crystal room and, just as they were about to destroy it, they got caught in a trap that, surprisingly, had been set by Latima. The girl seriously deserved an Oscar for her impeccable performance as a loyal servant because she had been on the enemy's side all along. Ard watched everything happening at the castle through an orb the imposter had shown him. Once Irina and Ginny were tied up securely, the imposter told Ard that if he wanted them to remain unharmed, he would join forces with him. He was in the middle of promising Ard that no harm would come to the girls when he suddenly switched up and began talking about Lydia. He asked Ard to understand why he was doing what he was doing and admitted that by the time the army reached the castle, Irina and Ginny's lives might not be saved. Back at the castle, the girls asked Latima why she had chosen to betray them when they had done nothing to her. Latima answered that she didn't harbor any bad feelings for them and had only taken them so that the imposter could manipulate Ard. She then stared at them, expecting them to grow worried and start begging, but the girls didn't as much as flinch. Ginny bragged that this wasn't her first tough situation and promised Latima that when she got free, she would reconstruct her face. Latima asked how she intended to break free when their magic was being limited, and Ginny called her an ignorant fool. The next moment, the girls freed themselves using script magic, and when Latima saw this, she summoned demons to fight them. Fortunately, the girls didn't have to lift a finger because Lydia arrived and saved them. Refusing to be captured, Latima tried to make Lydia understand that the imposter was doing everything to save her life. Lydia said she couldn't sit back and let the world burn just so she could stay alive, and that she was ready to accept the cards that fate had dealt her. Once she defeated all the demons, she declared that she was going to keep living and die like a champion because her mama didn't raise a coward. She then smashed the crystal with her sword, and the imposter's soul returned to his body at the same time his surveillance orb shattered. Ard then tried to convince him to forgive himself and let go of his guilt, but the imposter refused. He was so deep in his feelings that he unleashed his power and said he would complete his mission no matter what. Seeing this, Ard started chanting as well and didn't hold back when they started clashing. The imposter then asked Ard to recall that their final moments with Lydia hadn't been good, because they had been arguing over the treaty between humans and demons and refused to come to a compromise. The imposter said the memory still haunted him, and it was one of the reasons he didn't want to fail his mission. He continued begging Ard to reconsider and let him have his way, but Ard ignored his pleas and ran his sword through him. The moment his life force left his body, Ard and the girls began to disappear, so Lydia asked them what the future was like. They told her that it was bright and brimming with life, so she hugged them and asked them to deliver a message to Ard. A little while later, news of the imposter's defeat reached Varvatos, and he announced it to his men, who cheered loudly. When Lydia returned, he asked why Ard and the girls were there, and Lydia told him they had returned home, which wasn't exactly true because they were still in the void, and when Ard asked the god who he truly was, he claimed he was their only ally and slowly faded away. The next moment, Ard heard Sylphie calling out to him, and when he opened his eyes, he and the girls were back in the carriage, and time had started moving again as though nothing had happened. Olivia then told them to join the other students outside, and when Sylphie came down, she said it was good to be back in the old capital. Irina then rushed over to tell Ard that Lydia wanted him to know that no matter what happened, they would always be best friends. Ard stood frozen, trying to process those words, and when he still failed to move, Lydia's spirit gently pushed him forward, silently encouraging him to go. After she disappeared, Ard smiled in relief and walked away. Who was that mysterious god, and would the world eventually discover Ard's true identity? If you enjoyed this video, comment more, and don't forget to check out the next video.